Everyone thinks power and peace are compatible. Seneca knew better and left behind a confession. I've read the logbook myself. Around 49 AD, a man named Seneca sat down in Rome and began writing letters to a younger friend. Not the formal kind you'd seal for public record, private correspondence. The kind where you admit what keeps you awake at night. He was, at that moment, one of the most powerful men in the empire, advisor to the Emperor Nero, wealthy beyond measure, with access to everything Rome could offer. And he was terrified. What Seneca didn't know yet, and this is the gap that matters, was that his emperor would eventually order his death. That the very power protecting him would become the instrument of his destruction. But in these letters, he was already describing the trap. He was already mapping the escape route. That's what makes them so raw, so usable, even now. Seneca's situation was impassable by modern standards too. He was a statesman, which meant political enemies. A wealthy man, which meant constant envy. A confidant to power, which meant he could never truly rest. Every decision was scrutinized. Every word could be weaponized. He had everything a person could want, and almost none of it brought him peace. So he did something radical. He began writing to Lucilius, a younger friend, probably in his 30s, not advice from on high, but confessions from the trenches. He didn't pretend to have it figured out. He showed his work. He showed his doubts. He showed the exact moment when wealth stopped being useful and became a weight. In one letter, Seneca describes attending a dinner party. Dozens of servants, mountains of food, entertainment laid on for hours, and he felt nothing. Worse, he felt trapped. The more luxurious the setting, the more artificial it became. The more people around him, the more alone he felt. Sound familiar? That's because the problem isn't Roman, it's human. Seneca's insight was this. The problem wasn't luxury itself. It was that he'd forgotten how to want anything badly enough to refuse something else. Freedom, he realized, wasn't about having fewer possessions. It was about being deliberate about which possessions owned you. He started testing this. He'd wear cheap clothes intentionally, sleep on a hard bed, eat plain food, not as punishment, as practice. He called it poverty training. And the logic was precise. If you practice wanting less, then when actual loss comes, and it always does, you're not devastated. You're not broken. You've already rehearsed the thing you feared. I've seen this work in the field. The soldiers who survived longest weren't the ones who'd had the easiest lives. They were the ones who'd already accepted hardship. But Seneca went deeper. He wrote about what he called the tyranny of the crowd. When you're in power, everyone's watching. Everyone's judging. Everyone wants something, so you start performing. You start being yourself and become the role people expect. And the strange part, the more successful you become at the performance, the more trapped you feel. His solution wasn't to abandon public life. He couldn't. He was still advising Nero. He still had duties. But he created what I'd call internal distance. He'd participate fully in the day's events, then retreat mentally. He'd separate the role he played from the person playing it. He'd remind himself constantly, this isn't me. I'm observing this. I'm not defined by it. This is where the letters become genuinely useful for anyone navigating high-stakes environments, boardrooms, politics, academia, anywhere the stakes are real and the audience is watching. Seneca's saying, you can be fully present without being fully invested in the outcome. You can care about your work without letting it define your worth. He also wrote about time, how the wealthy waste it most. They have servants so they don't have to cook or clean, but they fill those freed hours with more obligations, more dinners, more performances. They're busier than ever. They've outsourced the tasks but kept the anxiety. Seneca's advice, be ruthless about what deserves your attention. Everything else is theft. What Seneca didn't know then, and here's that gap again, was how prescient this would become. 2,000 years later, we're drowning in the exact same trap. More stuff, more status, more connection, and paradoxically, more loneliness, more anxiety, more the sense that we're performing for an invisible jury. He was describing our world before it existed. One more thing Seneca emphasized, the importance of having someone to write to. Not a therapist, he didn't have that word, but someone outside the system, someone who wasn't trying to use you, someone you could be honest with. Lucilius served that role, and in writing to him, Seneca was actually writing to himself. The letters were the real work. He knew something we often forget. Clarity comes from articulation. You don't understand your own confusion until you try to explain it to someone else. The letters forced him to be precise, to move from vague anxiety to specific problems, to move from problems to actual strategies. That's why rereading them now, really reading them, can shift something. Seneca eventually died. Nero ordered it, as predicted. But the letters survived. They outlasted the empire that produced them. And they work because they're not abstract philosophy. They're a man thinking out loud about how to stay sane while drowning in power. How to keep your humanity when the system wants your performance. The core insight. That real freedom isn't about escaping your circumstances. It's about refusing to let your circumstances define you. It's about maintaining internal sovereignty even when external forces are screaming for control. That's what Seneca was actually writing about. That's what still matters. If you're navigating your own high-stakes world, whether that's a career, a public role, or just the constant pressure to perform, these letters aren't ancient history. They're a map drawn by someone who was actually lost. Someone who found his way back to himself and left directions for the rest of us. Subscribe for more essays on stoicism and ancient wisdom for modern life. There's a new framework for navigating complexity every week.